All right, what is going on, everybody? Today, I've got a super special guest for you guys. This is one of the most well-spoken individuals I have ever heard in my life in real person, and I've invested a fair bit of money into my personal and professional development. I've been around the world and done some speaking from stage and a lot of listening in the crowd. And this guy here is legit one of the best speakers I've ever heard. So I'm absolutely honored. Today's guest is Evan Stewart. He launched a really successful real estate business. So again, I told you guys this is not going to be a real estate podcast, but there's a really crazy correlation between people that are successful and ownership of real estate and businesses. So Evan's a kick-ass entrepreneur, and today I think we're going to get into some really cool talks about healthy obsession and mindset, and really just paving the way between understanding the balance of those two things and the way that they pull on you. So welcome, Evan. Thank you so much for doing this.
Man, thank you very much for having me. I'm really glad to be here. And I think, conversations like this are going to be good because you've had an opportunity to put out some content. And I think that the beginning listening base of your show, you've touched on a lot of important things so far, investing in finances and mindset, but I have a feeling we're going to bring it all together. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's wicked, man. So I think the best place to start for everybody here would just be at the beginning. Where did you come from? Who are you? You're calling it in today from Texas, I believe.
That's right.
So what's that like, man? Give us your story for those of the listeners that don't know you yet.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm I'm pretty straightforward, man. I come from a home that was put together. My family was middle class, upper middle class, so there was enough to do something, not enough to do nothing. And but more importantly, I come from a line of entrepreneurs, and so that's kind of where the whole story begins. Is that growing up, my childhood was not just about, hanging out and, one day you're going to get a job. I didn't have this mindset start from an early age of like, there are all these problems that exist in the world and you become part of it. It was more so there are problems that exist in the world and you become part of the solution. Yeah. And so the conversations I was having at an early age were, what problems are you having? How many of your friends share these problems? How much do you think someone would pay you to solve these problems? Where are you seeing these problems originate? And I mean, I was in elementary school when I started having these conversations with my father, my great uncle, some of the earliest mentors I had in my life in business. And I understand that there's a certain level of blessing and privilege that comes with being in that type of a home. That's not lost on me, but at the end of the day, that is my reality and where I came from. And so growing up, my mindset wasn't, I want, therefore I want it handed to me, or I need to go get a job. It was, if I wanted something or to achieve something or whatever it was, what business do I start? Who do I help? And how hard do I have to work to get there? And so that mindset from a very early age, because my father was an entrepreneur, I had always considered myself an entrepreneur. Even at a young age, I was, trading, reselling like ice cream in when I was really young in elementary school. And then it was like fruit snacks, and then it was toys, and then it was electronics, and then it was even bigger and bigger, and eventually real estate. And, it goes from a 50-cent ice cream to a $15 million property and everything in between. So it was, it's a pretty big spread,
Sweet.
But
that's a big spread.
Yeah. but it was good, man. I grew up, I had that ingrained in me, and I'm very grateful for that time. And it's really become a deep sense of who I am now and how I move in regards to, my identity for me as a person of faith is grounded in God, not necessarily my work, but my work is a huge component of how I live day to day. And so it's, I'm grateful for that. It's been a good journey so far.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. And I love that you're embracing sort of where you came from and not casting shade onto that, because there's just no point. Like, and I hear this and I see this on the internet when people are like, oh, he grew up with a silver spoon, right? Or the idea that somebody that isn't coming from like a necessarily a huge struggling background isn't working hard, right? Or putting in the reps or doing the hard work necessary to build something truly meaningful after that starting position. Just because some people start in a worse position doesn't make them any better or harder working. It's just they have to innovate using different tools. And on previous episodes, I talked about, I wanted a bike. I grew up near, it's called Blue Mountain here in Ontario, and it's a small mountain. So there was lots of hills, right? So like there's snowboarding, there's downhill biking and stuff like that. And from an early age, like I come from a pretty blue collar family, but I had a lot of like pretty much white collar friends because that's just the area. Like it's a fairly wealthy city or town. And most people had all sorts of things that I wanted, right? Like the fancy bike that actually could improve your performance because it's got better braking and capability and everything. So I'm like, I got to get that. And you know what my mom told me at 11 years old? She said, you want that bike? Go get a job. And I was like, oh man. Okay. So the job hunt started, and I was working for $6.20 Canadian an hour washing dishes at 11 years old, right? And then I never really stopped after that. And from that moment on, it's just been, a lot of failures, a ton of failures. Like we tried with my best friend, we tried an organic market garden. That was a big failure. Tried a landscape company. That pretty much was a failure. We were just trading time for money. And then kind of did some corporate world stuff, some door-to-door sales and stuff like that. But I never stopped grinding. And I think it's important just to vocalize that and to embrace it, right? Like you're going to be working hard, even if you started, not necessarily at the same spot as me. Like I talked in the first episode about how the roof was leaking, the ceiling would leak in my bedroom when it rained hard, like that's crazy. But that doesn't mean I'm different or working harder or doing anything different than somebody else that didn't come from that background. So I think it's really cool that you're embracing that. So yeah, man, tell me more. I got to know more. I'm actually looking down here. There's two of you on the call right now, and you're wearing an Obsessed shirt. What's that all about?
Yeah, as we talked about before the call, for those that are watching, there's two Evans because we're in the midst of hooking up all of our studio stuff because with COVID and all the craziness happening, we're bringing a lot of that literally in-house, like in my house. And so we're hooking up everything. So I have to be in a few different places, but yeah, I think what you talk about is key because most people don't come from really intense struggle. There's always going to be struggle. It's just a matter of, was it inflicted upon you or was it self-inflicted? Yeah. See, your struggle, my struggle, it was self-inflicted, having businesses and failures and bankruptcies and whatever you want to talk about. But at the end of the day, it's just a matter of if you're the one that inflicts it or if it through circumstances or society or the system or whatever you want to call it, if it's inflicted upon you. And so I think it's really important for listeners that are watching, that are listening to the show to embrace where they come from, because it is totally possible to be born into a stable home in a stable environment and not have the struggles growing up of a broken home or a broken neighborhood or a broken environment and still have grit and tenacity. Nothing against anybody that's coming from any other situation, a positive or negative, but it just is. It's totally possible to have grit regardless of your environment. And I think that's key. And that goes into like what you talked about, below there's Evan with the Obsessed shirt. And that I went back and I looked at my life and I started recognizing patterns of consistency. And I recognized when I started to try and put a definition to how I was living, the word became obsessed. Because I noticed these threads of consistency, what I call these tiny threads through my life of when I did something, I went all in. I went all in. Like a lot of people don't know this. I'm actually a classically trained concert pianist. And my final performance was Chopin's Grand Polonaise Brillante in E-flat major. It was a 9-10 minute long professional level piano piece. And it took me, give or take 900 and some change hours of practice to be able to get there. That's obsessed. Like when I went in there, I don't play too much anymore, but that's like obsessive going in. It's like with real estate, I was on a show where somebody asked, how did you do it? Okay, I did one thing. That was the only thing I did for 14 to 18 hours a day for 7 years straight. It's not complicated, but it is obsessive. And, so many people, when they hear the word obsessed, what they're thinking of is what I call an unhealthy obsession, which is it's a linear movement that begins with a need to overcome and overcompensate negative feelings like shame and guilt and abandonment and stress. And it can look healthy, but it's actually unhealthy. See, the narrative of obsession is an unhealthy narrative. Like when you say someone's obsessed, it's addiction, it's sexual addiction, it's stalker, it's whack. It's everything you don't want to be.
Yeah,
And
100%.
but it can look healthy too. So like I heard a story of a man whose wife had left him for somebody who was significantly wealthier than he was. And this individual, he goes back into the office, he goes back into the gym, he's building up his life, he's building up his bank account, he's building up his muscles, he looks good. Everyone's like, man, good for you getting back on it. But in reality, that was an unhealthy obsession because his actions stemmed from a need to overcompensate and overcome the guilt of loss, the shame of being a man that couldn't keep his home together. Cause, you know, as men, that's something that's important. You want to keep homes together and love. The feeling of abandonment, obviously, you know, somebody that you cared about abandons you. And it looks like a healthier movement. But the thing about unhealthy obsession is it stems from those feelings. It's a linear movement, and then it ends in a lack of fulfillment and regret. And so when I'm talking, and there's so much more depth there, I'm actually going to be writing a book on it called Breadcrumbs about consistencies of unhealthy obsession, because in order to live a life that's a healthy life, you have to define first the triggers of the unhealthy. But in the healthy obsession, in short, I believe that unhealthy obsession is a linear movement and healthy obsession is a cycle. So it's a 3-part cycle. It's an emotion, a mindset, and a discipline. And it feeds into itself. So when you're talking about moving in a healthy way, an all-in obsessive healthy way, you're talking about an emotion, which I believe is a stage in your life of revelation where you're called to move. You know, revelation is not getting hit with a freight train. It's like going home and just knowing deep down, gosh, you just feel so unfulfilled. It's not being inspired, fascinated, and motivated by your work. It's waking up drained, working, and then coming home a lesser version of even who you were that morning. Revelation is a gnawing on your soul and a pulling on your being to pull you elsewhere. And that emotion, the reason why it's a cycle is a lot of people get stuck in emotion, which is why a lot of people live in mania. A lot of people, like Mark Cuban down here says, they're called wantrepreneurs. So people that always want, you know, and you know the type, they go to the conferences, they go to the shows, they're always, oh, I'm going to do it. No, you're not. You want to do it, but you're more scared of the discomfort of the action than you are of living a life of mediocrity. So a lot of people get stuck there. Then from the emotion, it goes into the mindset. And the stage takes the longest. The mindset is a stage of preparation. And preparation is just planting seeds. Yeah. Because if you think about it, go ahead.
So I was just wondering, real quick question before you continue on this. How do I know which stage I'm at? So, and how do I tell? So this might actually really take us off on a track here.
No, let's do it.
How do I know which stage I'm at? Number one. And then number two, I guess maybe this should be number one, really. How do I know and truly know what's healthy and what's not? Because it's very easy when you're obsessing over, in your example, it's very easy to think that going to the gym, you know, twice a day, working out to get that body, get back at it, as you had said, that feels good, right? And I feel energized, right? And I'm feeling positive benefits and getting probably some people noticing that and starting to reach out. But how do I know? And how do I, as the individual, realize that this is potentially actually an unhealthy obsession that I'm really putting gas on the fire of it?
Yes, it's 2 qualifiers. It is what stemmed the action. So where did the action stem from? And then what is the impact of the action? So 2 qualifiers. Number one, the reason you're in the gym, let's use that as an example, because that is a healthy habit. We can agree. I work out, you work out, we all feel better. Did it stem, and your actions there, is it escapism? Is it stemming from you being so distraught that you have to just go into that environment to remove yourself from reality for a while? Is it stemming from your feeling of shame? And so you going to the gym is almost a punishment because you quote unquote weren't good enough, instead of a you constantly want to be working on yourself. It's where does it stem from, first of all? Because when we go to the gym, it's, well, I feel okay with who I am, and I want to develop that individual into stronger and faster and all the great things, right? So we're going to go to the gym, we're going to work out, we're going to work on our mind, body, spirit. But you walking through that door can also be, I'm ashamed of who I am. Not just shame, because sometimes people don't like who they are. Like if you recognize maybe you're unhealthy and you need to get back into shape, you can not be satisfied with who you are, but it's still positive because it's stemming from the positivity of trying to live a healthier life. But if it's stemming from, I need to take some time to escape where I've been because I'm not happy with who I am or where my life has been going, and this just happens to be that environment that I remove myself from. You can call it alcohol, drugs, gym, sex. I mean, anything you want to call it. That's escapism techniques. It would be, where does it stem from? But then the second one is huge. The second qualifier is every single action that you do, I believe, if you want to know if it's a healthy or an unhealthy obsession, does your action create sustainable, meaningful, positive impact for you and the people around you in a measurable way? If you cannot answer this, neither can anybody else. Does
I
your
love that
action,
word. Sustainability. I want to just let that sustain it, right? Get your foot on that pedal of the piano, sustain that note for a second. Because like I see this all the time where people are running down, chasing down diets, they're chasing down fads, they're chasing down little sprints, and they're unaware that they're going through all of their energy in that sprint. And if that's the case, it's really hard to win the marathon because everybody knows it's a marathon. You can't sprint your way through the marathon. And I see this all the time in business, in life, getting outside of the gym example, like I see this in business activities. Like when people are like, you know what, I'm going to go in, we make a lot of offers at our wholesaling business. So, I'm going to go do 2 offers today, or I'm going to do 5 offers today. I'm going to do that every single day. But then what happens is they quickly lose that energy. They lose the momentum because that was an emotion, not a mindset, right?
Right.
So,
That's exactly what it is. And that's the thing is anyone can burn hot for a moment. And the reason, I mean, I'm extreme. If your listeners don't know me and they haven't figured this out yet, I'm very tactful in how I speak because words have the power to move mountains. And that word sustainability is key because anyone can do something for a moment, right? Success, whether it's personally, spiritually, financially, relationally, success is a long obedience in a forward linear direction. One direction, one strat, like I talked about. How'd you build the company? I just worked my ass off for 7 years. That's it. And I didn't holiday and I didn't go out and I didn't get drunk and I didn't party. And I just did one thing, the only thing for 7 years. Lord knows how I got married during that time. I don't even know. But to finalize your question, it is a matter of where does it stem from? And then also in the same conversation, does it create meaningful, sustainable, positive impact? And if those answers are, it stems from something positive, and I do believe that it creates meaningful, sustainable, positive impact, usually starts with yourself. Doesn't mean that my, best friend's uncle needs to be positively impacted, but if those two things align, it's probably healthy. But if it's and deep down, see, this is where you have to get vulnerable with yourself. Because I can tell you, man, I'm working on my body, and deep down know that I'm so withdrawn from life that it's the only thing that I can find myself pouring into. And it's just escaping the reality that I need to have that hard conversation with so-and-so. So you have to get vulnerable with yourself and take inventory, as my friend Tim Story says. You have to take inventory, and you have to make sure that that it creates the impact, and then also that it's not stemming from something negative. Because if those two things align in a negative standpoint, it's probably unhealthy. And it took me a long time to figure this out, but I could even argue, I haven't fully committed to this statement yet, but the thought has been bouncing around in my mind that even my work in real estate could have potentially been an unhealthy obsession, because I dropped out of school and I come from a very well-educated family. My brother is a biomedical engineer. My mother is summa cum laude. It's just like everybody is super smart. So I'm like, I'm going to drop out of school. And so, I wasn't fulfilled in my work in real estate, but I had the money and I was producing. And so one could argue that things were going well, and I could show my parents and everyone who this of no fault of their own, I really needed to work to make them proud that, oh, look, things are going well. When in reality, I really hated my work, and those cracks started opening and opening and opening. And, at the end of that company, all I had was cash, but the rest of my life hadn't locked into place. And so it can be your work, it can be your physical, it can be your finances, it can be where you spend your time. To finish that statement, the qualifier I use now is just, if I live every single day the same as I did today, what kind of future would that create?
Dude, that's magic. I love that. That's a really cool statement, because that's truly going to reveal whether or not this is sustainable, what you're doing, and whether or not that's the path you want to be on. And I bet there's a lot of people out there that if they took inventory in that way, if I did the same thing I did today every single day for the rest of my life, would I be happy? I think if you took that inventory today, if I took that inventory today, I would be pretty upset. I haven't had an overly productive day, or like had I lived this day Groundhog Day style, I'd be pretty pissed off with myself because I made some bad decisions. But I think that the first step in making the next right decision is just knowing where you're at. It's taking the inventory, right? You
Yes.
can't possibly know what to do if you don't know where you're going and where you're at. And like, I think it's really important that people consider that. One other thought I had when you were speaking is that I think that there's a natural tendency when people are down or when they're not, when they're not feeling good, when they're feeling vulnerable, I believe that most people are likely to be more conflict avoidant. So what sort of habits, behaviors, and things have you implemented in your life so that you can be sure you're taking inventory?
On the other side of short-term comfort is a deeper intimacy with your own potential. I love that. And really what we're embracing is not that we are trying to run from things that are uncomfortable, but we have gotten too deep in our own comfort. It's a very simple, and which some people think simple is stupid. I think simple is great because life is friggin' complicated. I want to touch discomfort every day in some form or fashion. And it can be very little things. It can be eating healthy when you really want to grab something unhealthy. It can be waking up early when you're tired. It can be going to the gym. It can be, if you're in sales, getting those calls out of the way. It can be doing the things that are uncomfortable. And the reason why is that typically we are not afraid of the discomfort. We are afraid of the pain that'll happen in an uncomfortable situation. Typically, we're not afraid of life getting uncomfortable. We're afraid of a human nature of being harmed. It's not discomfort. It's, I think I'm going to be harmed, right? You're not going to walk around the city late at night because you don't like the city at night. It's because you believe that in that environment, you will be harmed, right?
Perceived risk. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's the same thing with discomfort. And so you need to touch it every single day and get people in your life helping you accountable. It's a concept I call earning my sleep, right? So every single day, I believe, wakes back up at zero. Like, what I love more than anything is next time you walk into a professional's office, they've got plaques on the wall, best, mortgage company since 2010, or best real estate agent, right? But that was 10 years ago. That was last year. See, I'm adopting that mindset every day. And I encourage your listeners to do the same. You don't have to keep it, right? I'm not always, correct, but it's worked for me. And what I mean by that is every day you wake up, just like yesterday's shortcomings won't become today's failures, yesterday's wins won't become. If I give you $1 million and say, live the rest of your life, that's going to run out real quick. You're going to learn how fast $1 million it isn't when you can't use credit or leverage it.
Yeah.
Same thing with your successes and your failures. And so because of that, what you do is you adopt the mindset that every day you need to move a little bit deeper into discomfort. So when out of your own choice, when you are placed there by circumstances or changes, COVID is a great example of this, stuff happens and moves you into that environment. You already know the language that you need to speak. You know how to be a wartime CEO metaphorically in your business. You know what it takes to fight for what you want to keep. Because during the peacetime, you have spent that time willfully putting yourselves in a training environment, right? I know you know this very well, right? Putting yourselves in an environment to train. So God forbid, in a literal sense, right? You dropped on the battlefield, you know how to fight back. And so many of us, like we talked about going to the gym, this is a great example of that. Like, how do you expect to stay disciplined and compete in your work if you can't even stay disciplined and compete with yourself? If you're at your work and you're doing your best, but you know that you're not making your calls, you're not pushing hard, how do you go home and justify to your wife that you're providing for your family when your ass is on Netflix or on your phone or whatever, sitting in your cubicle? Like, these are the conversations we need to have. Discomfort is not always, oh, you need to go to the gym, you need to get up, you need to make the call. Sometimes it's in our own mind of facing yourself in the mirror saying, I am no longer going to justify my shortcomings, lie to my family, telling my children they can be the best that they can be when I hate how I'm living right now. And I know deep down I sacrificed part of my potential for the comfort of a $65,000 a year paycheck in a cubicle, right?
Dude, that's huge. I absolutely love that. And yeah, I think it's really easy for people to lie to themselves and get comfortable in that way because, like, it's simple, it's easy, right? It's just easy to do. So what kinds of things do you think inspire people to make the change, right? Because most likely, if especially if you're listening to this right now and you're in the cubicle, and you should be producing, and right now you're doing this, which you're probably working a bit on your mindset, which is a good start. You're doing this and not
This is the
Netflix.
catch-22, right?
Yeah, it's kind of both on this one. But, right now, if you're in that behavior, that's probably a habit that you've formed. And so it's probably happening a lot. like a lot more than you'd want to believe if you started measuring it. Like how much, right? There's that funny thing on the iPhones have it where it'll tell you how much screen time you've had. And then when it breaks it down, I find it often people get shocked. Oh my, I spent 7 hours on Instagram. And how much of that am I going to tell myself was productive?
Yeah.
And how much of that was me looking at watches and cars and guns, And so I think when we start, again, taking inventory, that's a great way to put it, we can really start working on changing these behaviors and habits. And I'm hoping that that is sort of a nice bridge now where we can sort of talk about the differentiation between emotions and mindset. So how do we, because I believe, and I'd love to hear your definition, but for me, when I'm talking about mindset, I'm really thinking about my core being, my way of life, my outlook, no matter what happens. And it's, you said something really interesting a moment ago, like when you're moved into that environment. So mindset to me withstands environmental changes and factors, right? So my mindset shouldn't change when my environment is imposing on me some sort of threat or some sort of challenge or decision to be made. I believe that it should withstand that. So what's your take on this?
One of my favorite quotes, and I say it at least once a day on podcasts and shows and to my team, but it's just so applicable, is Archelius: we do not rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our habits.
100%.
And so if you're finding yourself trying to figure out how we move from the emotion to the discipline, then what I strongly recommend is start building in what I call micro accountability. This really, really, really helped me when I was training, because we all have to learn this. We all have to learn it. And even when I remember in real estate, my early years in real estate were really unproductive because I didn't have that muscle. My first year I made $30,000, $27,000, something like that. Really unproductive. And you start creating micro commitments to yourself and to other people. So I'll give you an example of this. Say, Adam, I'm not going to call you tomorrow. I tell you what, Adam, I will give you a call tomorrow by 3 p.m. afternoon with the answers to this, this, and this that you discussed. Okay, the reason why that's important is now when I call you, you know exactly the expectation that I'm supposed to bring to the table. So whether you bring it up or not, hey, he either did it or he didn't. But you start doing that to yourself. Stop. If you wake up at 9 in the morning, don't wake up at 5 in the morning. That's not sustainable, but now wake up at 8. And do that for 14 days and then wake up at 7, things like that. The micro commitment. The biggest one was the one that I mentioned of telling people exactly what and why and when you engage in the conversation next. Hey, let's grab a coffee sometime. Awesome. How does Tuesday at 4 sound at the Starbucks up on Main Street? You see what I mean? Or I guess for you, it'd be the Timmy's right up on Main Street, but whatever it is. We don't have that down here, man. One of the things that we need to get down here in Texas, but the micro commitments are to yourself, and then they're also to other people. And it's as simple as stating definitively what you're going to do and then doing it. And I know this is wildly simple, but it's a really hard discipline to master. It's stating exactly what you're going to do and then doing it. And the reason why that muscle is important is because you start to affirm your mindset that, maybe you're not a piece of crap and you can, in fact, do the things you say you're going to do. And you start to build that positivity back in your mind. It starts to, number 2, show the people around you that you are a man or a woman of your word, and you can, in fact, ignite positivity, strength in other people based on your disciplines now. And the third is it starts to build a muscle of, if I, then I. If I could do this, then I can do this, right? If I went to the gym yesterday, then I can go today. If I made the sale yesterday or the 100 calls yesterday, then I can go today. I remember, this is so funny, actually. I haven't thought of this story. I don't think I've ever said this story because it's literally, I hadn't even thought of this in like years. But as I'm speaking about this, it made me think about when I was in elementary school. I was skateboarding and stuff like that, like I guess kids do. And I was so scared of, doing this thing called drop in, where you drop into the ramp. Yep. And gosh, I haven't skateboarded in like 20 years. It's hilarious. But for whatever reason, it came to my mind. And it's funny because I was so scared of this tiny little ramp. And somebody, my friend, kind of helped me, worked me up. Well, don't do that one, do this one. And we started on flat ground and then slanted and more slanted and more slanted and more slanted. And then I did the small ramp. And that single day, I did every single ramp, including the large professional one in the back. Because once it was broken free in my mind, I recognized that same principle, the baby discipline, could be applied towards bigger and bigger experiences. Same thing in your life. And that's probably where I would begin, Adam, is what, that micro discipline is so key.
I think that's massive because you also get the benefit of the positive reinforcement from your emotional state, right? Like you feel good when you get those little wins. Just on yesterday's episode with Emma Pace, I was talking about the idea that I set exactly what you're talking about. Actually, I set micro wins for myself so that I'm beginning to feel as if I've already had a success just by doing the call, right? The call might not lead to business, but the call itself, I feel good about making the call. And that gives me the energy and the intention to move forward into the next call.
Right.
And those little wins, like I find they compound. They're like leverage in your emotional state. Like you can just lever it up, just do more calls. And I find that when I'm not feeling good, like this morning, I wasn't feeling high energy. I wasn't feeling great. I kind of had a bad sleep. And I arrived here. Why? Because I had made a commitment to you that I would be here on time, and I made a commitment to myself that I would show up, right? And I talked about this too. It's different, that being here and showing up are different things. And I was talking about it on the previous episode as well, that when I'm here, when I'm speaking to you, I'm Adam JD Martin. That is a different person. That is I'm always the same, but I bring it when I'm Adam JD Martin. And I think when you're living in accordance to your purpose and what you're doing, I believe that those two things come closer. They start like melding closer, and they get more of your identity, so that you're always bringing it. You're always showing up. And even when you're having a bad day, you know that you're just one good decision away from a good day. And I think that's something people really should focus on, because it's easy. It's so easy to have a bad day. It's easy to notice, you get cut off in traffic. Someone gave you the finger, something's bad going on in your city. Maybe people are rioting about racial contention and stuff like that. And, it looks pretty bad. And at the same time, there's a pandemic and everybody seems to be kind of slacking right now and not really doing their thing. I think it's really easy to fall into that trap. Like it is a deep, deep, deep hole, and it's really easy to step into it. Stepping out of it, funnily enough, I think is just as easy if you realize that there's actually a ladder and it's just one rung at a time.
Yes.
It's just beside you. You just got to turn around and see it. It's kind of like the allegory of the cave, right? Once you know it's there, once it's revealed, the figures are revealed, it's really hard to unsee. And so if you can change that mindset, you can really start living with purpose and get closer to what it is that you want to be doing. Because I've been in that position too, like you were talking about. When I was doing door-to-door sales, I was making crazy money. It was unbelievable. Like it was just hectic. But I was 2 provinces over from my home, never got to see my family, didn't get to see anybody, living out of a suitcase for 3 months and literally pounding the pavement, pounding the doors. Did it change my life in a positive manner? Absolutely. Was it unhealthy? Absolutely. I was doing all the wrong behaviors, right? Like I bought a sports car from the phone. Like I called a dealership in Toronto, bought a car over the phone and had it shipped to my house. And like, I was like going crazy, like eating bad, like eating poorly, making poor health decisions. Everything was going bad, but on paper, it looked so good. I was successful, right? I'm making the money, I'm doing the thing. And it's a dangerous hole to get into. What I think is even more dangerous. Yeah.
You're talking about, and I didn't mean to interrupt there,
No
but what you're talking about is everybody talks about the ROI. And listen, you're a real estate guy. I'm a business guy. Like ROI. Whether or not you're in business, you've heard it. Return on investment. How are my time, energy, and resources going to come back in multiples? That's it. But see, there's 3 different levels of return. We've got an ROI that everybody measures, which is what you were measuring, the ROI of, therefore, if I have this, right, we talked about this, if this, then that. If I have this money, then I have the sports car. Listen, I went through that too. I think everybody, when they start, especially when you don't come from those types of opportunities, regardless of what level of not having it, you still don't have it, and then you get it. I mean, it just is part of, it really is. You got to get it out of your system. I'm a firm believer in that. Yes. Just hopefully some people never really flush it. But you get it out of your system, and everyone looks at the ROI, but there's also the ROR, which is return on relationships. So I believe that a transaction is a byproduct of a mutually vested relationship, not the goal of the relationship. That's a return on relationship. How does your life get better because I'm in it, and my life get better because you're in it? Not that we're broken people. We're 2 grown-ass men with regular lives, but how are, with you, with your friends, with your spouse, how is their life better now that you two are together? So there's the ROR. So we've got ROI, we've got ROR, but then the third, which no one talks about, is the ROS, the return on self. And see, it actually, everybody, when they start thinking about how they're spending their time, energy, and resources, they think about it in that order. I need to make my money, and therefore I can work better with my friends, and then I'll have time to go to the gym. No, it needs to flip. It's that part of, like, if you're listening to this, like you talked about, you're stuck in that cubicle, you're listening to this, you might actually be doing this in the right way. See, it starts in your mind, because in your mind is the only investment outside of Alzheimer's, dementia, or death that you can't lose, okay? Realistically. So you've got your return on yourself first, which is you pour into yourself, because if you think your entire life is an output of you, wouldn't you create more? Therefore, you can pour more. So it's the return on yourself, then the relationships. See, so many people will puff up their chest like they're somebody and try and get to someone who is somebody before they themselves are valuable to that person. People that have made it know when you're full of crap. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. Like, oh, I run this drop shipping company, and I pull up in a, dude, no one gives a crap. Like in my time in luxury real estate, I have met people who are worth billions of dollars. They don't care that you have a nice car.
Yeah.
People that have made it don't care. They don't care that you have a Rolex. Like I know if you've got one, do it for you. But see, again, the ROR, build positive vested relationships. Okay. So you've got your return on yourself. This never ends, by the way. This cycle continues. You pour into yourself, mind, body, spirit, mind, body, spirit, mind, body, spirit, relationships. How can our relationship be valuable together? And then you've got the ROI, which is once those two things are locked, then there's an opportunity, my word, sustainably, to create income for both parties, right? And so if you start with we're going to make money together, when there's no other foundation, if the deal falls apart, everything falls apart, and now you feel bad because your identity was grounded in that person's perceptions of your actions and the deal, instead of first in yourself, or if you're a person of faith, in your spirit, and then second in your relationships, and third in your work. See, your life is built your business is built to serve your life. Your life is not built to serve your work. But we get that wrong when we get that priority wrong.
Yeah, that's absolutely huge. So moving on then from mindset, what's the next step? So I've got control of my emotional state. I've fixed my mindset, or at least I've worked on. I don't think you can fix it. I think it's a living art. Like, I think it's constant that we're improving on it, right? Even now, I'm thinking about something the very state. My only takeaway from this whole episode, if I get one thing, it's going to be take inventory, and then the statement about, like, if you lived this day every single day, would it be a fulfilling life? That was crazy. So let's say we've worked on our mindset. We're taking steps in the right direction. What's next?
Yes. So and you're referencing that cycle of healthy obsession, right? Because that's literally what we're doing, is we're actually having a conversation in regards to the step of building healthy, sustainable obsessions in your life, which is beautiful, because we didn't even mean to do it, but it's just the cycle of being successful. So you've got your emotion, your revelation. We talked about that moves you into the next stage of the mindset. I always say that if you want to prosper where you're planted, you first have to take root where you're placed, because it gives us the grace and the space to recognize that, unlike a bee going from flower to flower, we need to ensure that we actually stay for just a moment so we can take root and grow where we're at. I always want to be there. I always want to be there. I always want to be there. If you were supposed to be there, first of all, God would have put you there. But second of all, maybe there's something you need to do right here, right now. And I use the example of an individual that I called in on a show that I was doing months ago. And he was like, man, I'm a musician. I'm super gifted. Like, I'm talented, but I'm working at 7-Eleven. Like, I'm at the convenience store. And so we talked about that. He's like, how can you say that I'm supposed to prosper here when I'm supposed to be playing stages and producing? And we built a dialogue around that. Well, maybe while you're here, what you can do is you can master the art of 30-second interactions with thousands of people when it doesn't matter, because you're at the convenience store. So then when you are able to go into the club and show your music, and you finally see that person that can change your whole life and career, you've already mastered the art of making an impression, introducing yourself, giving them a reason to care, and moving the conversation forward in under a minute in other environments that aren't completely isolated. There's other things going on. So now when you meet that person and it's ready for you, that relationship can take both of you to the next level. You can do it because you took root where you were at, and you were able to prosper in that moment where you were planted, and learn from that moment in your life. So that's that second phase. It's totally possible. We just have to be observant and recognize, what if I am here Doesn't mean you shouldn't move. I'm not saying that, but if I am here, how can I milk as much as possible from this moment and as much lesson as possible from this moment right here? You and your spouse had a
That's
fight.
massive.
Like, what specifically caused that? What specifically was the outcome? How can you love your spouse deeper through positive and loving interactions of friction? Things, I mean, it could be anything. So then the third is the discipline. So we have the emotion revelation, we have the mindset preparation, we have the third discipline, which is cultivation. Emotion, mindset, discipline, that's the cycle. Cultivation is not life gets amazing. Cultivation is a moment where you start to reap what you have been sowing. It's a moment for me when I sold my first luxury home as a real estate agent. And I'll talk about why this is important in a second, because it immediately links back to the emotion. It's a cycle: emotion, mindset, discipline. Boop. Because what happens after we do something great, we typically think, I can probably do that again. I can probably do it better and do it faster.
Yeah.
That's why that cultivation, it's a moment. For us last year, cultivation was after I had left my company and I started doing this Obsessed Academy thing and speaking. And we host the first Obsessed conference. I speak on stage, see the room, see the visuals, see the baby version of the big vision that we had come to life. We sit back down. All right, guys, we can do this again. Looking across the street at the Dallas Cowboy practice stadium, that's 10,000 people. All right, in 5 years, we're going to fill that. You know, that type of thing. That's emotion, which is the revelation. And then immediately it goes back to the mindset, which is the preparation. So in order to do that, we need to fill next. So last year was 5,000 square feet. This year is 50,000 square feet. And eventually we're going to build our way up. That's the cycle. And that cycle worked consistently again and again and again, eventually produces this one thing kind of on the outside, which is called saturation, obsession, overflow.
Interesting.
And that's when life, I mean, that's like Jeff Bezos, baby. That's when life really gets good. That phrase, indestructible wealth, that's my definition of saturation, which is like your great grandchildren have opportunity because of your labor now.
Yeah. Let's explore that idea. That's really interesting. Indestructible wealth is really interesting because you have to like truly have a sustainable and healthy obsession about whatever it is that you are doing to get you there. Like that, I can't, it's interesting because it's almost like an ineffable space to me right now. Like I can't imagine it, which is probably a good sign that I need to take inventory, right? Like, what does that look like? What's the path to there? What are my long-term goals if I were to imagine indestructible wealth or happiness? Right? Like,
well,
how do you
I actually want to change that word for a second because
Sure.
I actually misspoke there. I've been saying indestructible wealth. That's not the definition I align with, and I've been trying to shift this. So it was just my reflexive habit. It's indestructible legacy.
Legacy.
I
That's a
want to touch
great
on
word.
that because wealth immediately goes back to ROI. If I make $1 billion, okay, I'm talking about legacy. Mother Teresa had an indestructible legacy, and she was not a rich woman. In fact, she was very poor. You look at individuals that have indestructible legacies. The phrasing is, my great grandchildren have opportunity because of my labor now. Now, we can all agree money is important, but I'm saying opportunity. And sometimes opportunity will take shape in a way outside of a financial opportunity. And so that is important because there might be some of you thinking, I really want to do this thing, but it doesn't make me a lot of money. There's a friend of mine that does amazing ministry work. And he's moving in faith and he's changing the world and positively impacting the lives of other people and really building a name for himself. He's probably never going to make millions and millions of dollars. But in his niche and in his community, his name, that namesake, is changed for generations because of his labor now. So I did want to apply that distinction. That was my fault and responsibility for stating that. But I want to make sure that we're clear on that because there is a difference, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is a very good change of words there to legacy because legacy is so interesting. And recently we actually had one of Canada's most innovative real estate investors at a young age. He just passed away, Stefan Arnio.
Yep,
I believe he was like 33, and I hope I didn't mess that up. But in any case, he was young, too young, arguably. So he got hit with a few different types of cancer all at once, and it was just too much. And I think it caused a lot of people in our space to really reflect. Are we setting ourselves up to contribute to something that will survive beyond us. And Stefan did this in a great way through his books and his writing and like truly prolific content production that is helping and still will continue to help people in real estate, in the real estate investing space, at least for, years to come. I don't think it'll ever really die. I mean, these were fantastic books. Not all of them were necessarily about real estate investing, but I mean, these were really, truly detached versions of himself that are going to continue living on. And I love that idea. Like, I think that is really fantastic and somewhat a bit of the fire that kind of, when I took inventory, caused me to do this, right? Like, I want to be having these conversations and to have them more. What do I need to do? Well, I need to set my intention and then hold myself accountable and do it with other people that I can be accountable to, and then get to share it with the world, which I think is really fantastic. But I wonder, like, how do you know what the right thing is? So there's a lot of people that probably have an idea of what their passion is, but how do you know it's the right thing? Like, do you leave that job? Do you quit your sustainable safety net for the passion? What, like, how do you think people make this decision?
I'm going to be super, super, super frank with you. I have two answers to that. And honestly, it just matters of where you want me to go, because as a person of faith, I can go super hardcore spiritual, or I can go extremely agnostic. That's totally up to you. Which one do you prefer?
Oh, that's tough. Let's get the agnostic version.
That's fine. So if you want to, how you know is a couple of different areas. So I use this phrase, threads of consistency. So threads of consistency are moments whether you intentionally or unintentionally lived in alignment with a calling and a gift. And I know that sounds still really ambiguous, but I'm going to break it down and make it easy to explain. Let's use the example of, let's say maybe you're an accountant and you're working with numbers, and you're kind of stuck in this box. Your day-to-day is pretty much the same. You do things the same, but whenever someone calls you, maybe there's a disruption in a friend's life, they call you just, hey, I really need to talk to you, Adam. I really got to talk to you about this. And you recognize that you're kind of the go-to person, that you actually have a gift for walking, whether you intentionally recognize and acknowledge it or not, that over your life that you've actually been working a gift to bring clarity to other people's ambiguity, especially emotional ambiguity. That when someone has relationship problems or work problems or schooling problems or whatever it is, that they'd call you and that you're sound counsel. And so you could actually have a gift of emotional stability and communication. And that could be a gift or a calling, but you haven't actually touched on it because it's just been, this is kind of what I do. Right? You'll hear people say, this is something I'm good at. Yeah, it's just, I'm kind of better at something. Like my brother and I are great examples of this. We think very differently. He's an amazing man, an incredibly intelligent, literally like genius level person. And he is super gifted when it comes to numbers and data. Like he's one of those people that can remember everything. Names, dates, places. You start talking about history. Oh yeah, well, this presidential action caused this overseas and then it brought this person and this is why it was, he's one of those people. I don't really think that way. I think very broad brushstrokes, very, this is why I left school and went into business, and he completed school and went into biomedical engineering. But what I'm saying is this phrase of threads of consistency. Okay. We talked about taking inventory, do that again, but start thinking of these qualifiers. What comes naturally to you that does not to most other people? What are ways, whether knowingly or unknowingly, you have been affirmed in a gift? A gift would just be a trait that without working too hard at it, you have a deeper ability to actually produce results. Because if you've got someone that's starting to even identify, what do I do? Start with that. Because typically a life that's inspiring, fascinating, and motivating, where you can wake up invigorated and come home fulfilled, begins with living in alignment with what is naturally a strength. This doesn't mean that we have to ignore our weaknesses, but there's a difference between a strength and a gift. And threads of consistency, if you really think back in your life, you can start to pick up reflectively with self-insight, start to pick up these moments of consistency where you've actually worked in alongside, in alignment with your gift, but you haven't identified it before. And so for me, when I looked back at my life, I saw threads of consistency in business. I was good at just kind of making things happen and driving revenue. I saw threads, and it doesn't have to be just one. I saw threads of consistency in relationships, just genuinely connecting with people, mainly because I give a crap and I like connecting with people. Threads of consistency, as you and I know, in communication. I believe one of I believe truly my gift is in communication, bringing certainty to ambiguity. And I'm not saying this in an arrogant way. It doesn't have to be arrogant to recognize a strength, but in my life, I took inventory and those were some strengths of mine. And so if you're listening to this and that's your question, do the same. Start to take inventory. How do you communicate with people? When people call you and they need you, what do they need? Like fundamentally, what do they need? Do they need your communication, your insight, your counsel, your gift, your work, your mind, your hands? Like what is it? And then from there, you can start to think, okay, so what area of work, if we want to get professional, would better align me with working alongside those gifts? And then you start to move in that direction. That would be where I would begin.
That's amazing insight, man. I love that. One of the key things that you said there is fundamentally.
Mm-hmm.
So I really love the idea of cutting through the noise, right? Because there's a lot of noise. There is a lot of ambiguity in most people's lives. But if you can see through the noise, like what is the pain or suffering that's being, inflicted on this person that you're helping out with, and how fundamentally are you doing it? And I see this a lot too with people that want to get started. I've had about 24 people reach out since the first episode of this show, which I was not expecting by any means. So it was really fantastic to get that positive reinforcement. But a lot of their messaging was like, I've just been waiting for somebody to give me the permission to do it.
Mm-hmm.
To make a change, to make a move, to mitigate my losses and start making that positive change today. And I absolutely love getting that feedback and just seeing that we can impact people. And I think that like fundamentally they knew what they needed to do, right? They already know. And you already know when you're getting in your way, you already know that you're in your way. You just need permission to do it. And so I think these types of discussions and talking about this, because everything you've spoken about today, there's an interesting pattern here. Absolutely everything you've spoken about today has revolved around essentially like self-control and like being able to change your habits or behaviors or mindset or anything that's happening to you. And the idea that you're not a victim. Things aren't happening to you. We didn't say this in this discussion, but everything that we've been talking about is about having a choice, right? We're all making that choice, and it's happening, with almost everything that we do. There's a choice to eat well. There's a choice to sleep well. There's a choice to communicate and take the lessons away from an argument with a spouse or friend or stranger. There's a choice to live intentionally. I think maybe intention's the right thing here. And just being able to truly make decisions that will change our lives. Like we're doing it all the time. And it's crazy. It's sort of like a large ship steering. Like a little change is going to have a really big impact over a long distance.
Well, think about the multiplier on that. So how I make choices, and, I did 75 hard where I had no soda, no anything like that. I actually had a burger, like a fast food burger. I know, shoot me. It was my first one since December 22nd last week. And I'm like, you know what? Every once in a while, I'll go for one of those, but it's not my habit anymore. Things are okay in moderation. Like a glass of wine is fine. Don't get drunk off your ass. The multiplier effect was something that was really powerful to me, which is if this decision is the only decision that I make. So if I only drink Coca-Cola, if I only do this, then what will that look like? And so if you're really struggling with those choices, it's if this is the only thing that I do. And that leads into this concept of replacement. Instead of watching Netflix, watch Masterclass. Instead of listening to, just some random news channel, listen to podcasts. Now, I'm not the believer that you need to cut out all joy. Like every once in a while, once every few months, I'm going to go to fast food and get a burger and drink a Coke, and my life is going to be fine, and like that's fine. I'm not saying cut out all joy, but what I am saying is have the discipline enough to have that truly be a reward. Like if 2 or 3 times a year you drink a soda, you're probably not going to die. Yeah. But if it is the only thing that you do, that concept of choices is key. But for me, it was the multiplier and then the replacement. So I think that's huge. I love the fact that you touched on that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And one of the hacks to this too, if you're kind of sitting there not really knowing where to get started, I found that I lack, this is like a character flaw that I've been working on forever, but I lack certain degree of self-control to the point where I'm basically an opportunist when it comes to diet, you know, sex, things like that. Like where I really do need to be like conscious of it. I need to be
Mhm.
aware of myself because I know that when there's cake, Adam eats cake. And
Yep.
it's like, oh my God. So what do I do? What I found that's really helped me in my life is I just don't have it around. So
Yeah,
I
that's it.
have a very specific way that I go through the grocery store even. Like I know my grocery store. It's for me, this is the concept again. I've touched on this before
Mhm.
from Jocko Willink, the idea that discipline equals freedom. So when I go into that grocery store, I literally know where every one of my vegetables are and I know
Mhm.
the exact proteins and where I'm going to get them. And then I get the hell out of there because there's cookies, there's chips, there's delicious things that I cannot be permitted to see because I will eat them. And
Well, and
so
that's the thing. If you think of yourself, like literally, if you're listening to this, you think of yourself as an addict.
yeah,
That's it. Like seriously,
legit.
that's what I did. Like when I was in college for the 3 semesters I was in school, um, I was so unhealthy. I would have upwards of 20 sodas per day.
Whoa,
And I had sodas and I had tea and I had Red Bull. And I'm not exaggerating. And I've always been
dude.
this size because I have a fast metabolism, but, um, I would literally have dinner that would be a pack of bacon, a frosting, and a Monster. Like I
What?
was so, I mean, I don't know how I didn't die. So unhealthy. And so I kind of look at my life and I'm like, I probably shouldn't do that. And so when I changed, I just thought of myself as an addict and I cut out everything just like you. And see, so many of us are like, well, now it's 11 o'clock and I'm kind of hungry and I'm kind of snacky and that, but it's in everything. Like if you think of yourself as an addict, then even if the addiction is complacency, then start building an environment as an addict. So if you are a complacent person that have trouble getting up in the morning, start setting meetings at 7 in the morning.
Yeah,
Seriously, like things like that, just little tiny replacements. It can shift. See, this movement that we're talking about isn't complicated. It's not complicated. Like I had trouble getting up in the morning. I started setting meetings at 6 in the morning. I needed to be up and showered and dressed and caffeinated and competent by 6 in the morning, which means now I'm getting up earlier. And then plus I'm getting meetings out of the day. So by 8, when the rest of the world is waking up, I already have part of the day accomplished. Little things like that. It's just you do it and then you have the discipline to stick to it. That's it. Like it's just not complicated. I wish it was more complicated because then you and I could make a lot of money teaching people how to do it, but it's not.
yeah,
That's just it.
absolutely. Absolutely, man. And we did this on my team too. We noticed that the guys, because we do really have like a very entrepreneurial environment, and we all live together in a house. We call it the mansion in London,
Yeah, yeah.
Ontario. And it's really easy though for bad habits to seep in when you truly have control of your own time. And I think that a lot of people don't realize how bad they are at managing themselves until they're given that freedom, right? Until
Yes.
they're given, it's the same with everything, until they're given a cake, right? How much cake are you going to eat when it's in front of you? Until they're given a case of beer, a case of wine, a bunch of women, whatever. Like people don't realize that they don't
Ooh.
have the self-control. And so we set our morning workouts with the team every morning at 7 a.m. now. So what do you,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you're rolling out onto the workout at 6:55,
But
but
you're there.
maybe you're more like me and you're getting up at 5:30, 6, and you're actually ready for that type of a thing. But what's not going to happen is we're not going to let each other down because
Yeah.
we've got that accountability in. But I want to let you get to that idea that you just had. Let's hear
Well,
it.
I just had there's this concept that perception is reality.
Cool.
And this is huge. So like I'll give you an example. When I was a real estate agent, I would not and this is I want you to think of yourself as you're running for president or office or wherever you're listening in the world. That if you know, like if you run for office, all that skeletons in the closet come out. Right. And
Yeah.
we're down here in the United States. I don't know enough about your political process to know how bad it is, but I think it's probably pretty similar. When people
Yeah.
run for office, all of a sudden it's like, oh, all this stuff comes out. Perception is reality. See, what they're discussing is the perception. So, like when I was in real estate, I would not show homes to women alone. I just wouldn't. Nothing's going to happen. I'm a committed man. I've got an amazing wife. Nothing's going to happen. The perception is Evan and an attractive young female go into a home and come out after a certain period of time. And
Yeah.
they're alone in a vacant home. Okay. I don't like that perception. See, if you think about it, don't even allow the perception of disruption, whatever it is. You've mentioned a couple of different things. If it's as fundamental in black and white and easy to solve as don't be in that room. Like in our office right now, it's, I'm a home office because of COVID, but we almost were in the process of building out a much bigger space, which we had to put on the back burner. Like meeting rooms, everything is glass. I don't want anyone to be uncomfortable, men or women, to be uncomfortable in my space. Things like that. Those are easy perceptions to solve, but then it's also the perception of in the micro. Okay, so I'm a man that's disciplined. I'm very open. I love great, fantastic French and Italian wine. I have family who's French and Scottish and Italian, and wine and food is a big part of my family. I will not be drinking when I am at an environment. If you notice, I've come up to your environment. I've spoken to you guys many times. I bet not once you've ever seen a glass of alcohol in my hand. Not once. Now, I'm not like, against it or anything. It's just perception is reality. Therefore, if I have the perception of discipline, I will ensure that in all environments, except for private environments where I'm allowed to be with friends and whatnot, in environments where I am looked upon as the disciplined person, that the perception is reality. But give yourself the discipline to have those things and think about not who am I, but how am I perceived to be. You might think you're a super nice person. Someone might think you're an ass. Great. Where's the disconnect? And then it expands out from there.
Man, that's I actually love that. That's really cool. That's a great idea. I've really been leaning into that and embracing that on a fundamental level to myself in terms of like just allowing me to be me on all fronts and all social circumstances. And I'm still not sure how it plays out, but I'm pretty sure that the people that dislike me or don't agree with me are most likely going to disappear a bit. Like they're just going to go into the dark. And the people that do agree with me are most likely going to be having even better relationships with me and even higher quality conversations and really getting to the root of like, what can we do to make each other's lives better, right? What you were talking about before, like how is our relationship improving both of our lives? So
Yep,
what a fantastic
absolutely.
discussion, man. I do want to be super respectful of your time. I think Tori gave me an hour with you. So I think we're up at that hour. So if there's any final comments or anything else that you wanted to chat about, let's get it out of the way now. And man, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate you coming on here.
Of course, absolutely. No, I'm grateful for this as well. Great conversation always goes super fast, doesn't it? So
Yeah, no.
it really does. It really does. And so I think the biggest thing is really if you're, oftentimes we know the drill, right? You listen to podcasts in a car or an office or at the gym or something. Really go back and listen to this episode when you can maybe take notes and or watch or however you consume your content and Adam's content. Go back and look at what we discussed here. Because what we're talking about is, well, it's very fundamental, it's easy to implement, and it's simple to understand. And the beauty about that is when you apply simple things to complicated structures like life, that's when you really start to see these shifts happen. It doesn't have to be more complicated. And if it worked for us essentially, then it very much can work for you, and you can tweak it and you can adjust it. But what we talked about here are very important, deep principles about just how to start aligning deeper with that purpose. And so my final thought, honestly, is, we'll connect and I'll give you an opportunity to find where we're at in a little bit. But before then, just make sure that you're really understanding the importance of this conversation, because I wish I heard conversations like this when I had just gotten started. And so hopefully it inspired something in you too.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I personally have major takeaways from this conversation too. So I appreciate it so much. And I really do. I hope that what this is going to become is an open and ongoing discussion, with myself and whoever might be listening. And I hope that I can attract more high quality conversations like this into my life, because I believe that this is a healthy obsession for me. And I'm leaning into my natural talent and skill of communicating. I've always loved talking. I've always loved getting connected. And this is me living out my passion right here. So thank you anybody that stuck around for this discussion. And I do hope that you will go back, make some notes, really keep these takeaways, and be intentional, right? Like make those changes. If there's something in your life that you want to achieve and you want to start doing better, start today, right? Tomorrow, it's not a good option. Start today. The best time was yesterday, but this is the second best right now. And yeah, that's it for me. I don't want to, I just want to jump off this and stop it right now because we're at a perfect spot. So I appreciate all of you. If you're on the YouTube channel, hit subscribe because I am in a competition with Mike Nowicki, first to 500 subscribers. And he's got to buy me a new suit. And I just want to stick it to him a bit on that one. So hit subscribe on there. And if you're not already following me, it's Adam JD Martin on Instagram and all of the social platforms. And Evan Stewart can be found at Real Evan Stewart on Instagram. And I think most other platforms as well, just as Evan Stewart. So give the guy a follow. Please reach out. Thank you for his time. Connect, whatever you guys can do. It's been an honor, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on, man. I appreciate it too.
I like to wrap up every single one with kissy face. So here we go. Love and appreciate them, guys. Have a good day.